If you're looking to upgrade your controller from a basic pad or some cheap plastic arcade stick, then you've no doubt stumbled across the new Mayflash F700. On paper it appears to have all the basics like a quality joystick lever and arcade style buttons, but it's also wireless, easy to mod, and claims to be compatible with PS5, Switch, and almost every other platform you've ever heard of. And all for half the price of other arcade sticks, so surely it must be too good to be true, right? Well, I'm NihongoGamer, and in a world where fighting game controllers are getting simpler to make, but at the same time getting more expensive for seemingly no apparent reason, I was more than a little excited by the idea of a new arcade stick that keeps the price down while packing it full of features that will make it easy to upgrade as you improve at the game. Get ready for the controller that wants to be everything to everyone, because this is the Mayflash F700. Now before we go into the details of all the cool stuff you can do with it, let's go over the basics. It's an arcade stick with a lever on the left and buttons on the right. And the reason it's better than already a lot of the other cheap controllers out there is that you do not require an extra controller to be plugged in to authenticate it. Just want to make a quick note here that I did receive this product for the purposes of making this video, but I wasn't required to say anything specific about it. I don't have to send it back at the end, and of course all opinions are my own. Now it's not an officially licensed controller, but it is compatible with PS5 straight out of the box and compatible with all of these other platforms as well. Kind of crazy how many platforms it's actually compatible with. It's also wireless, so using the control panel over here you can switch between wireless mode, wired mode, or also wireless with Bluetooth. If you don't want to use Bluetooth and you want to use wireless mode, especially for things like PlayStation, which doesn't work in Bluetooth mode, this is the adapter, and it has a dedicated compartment right here which you can just slide in and close away. This also happens to be the compartment for the wired USB cable, which is plenty long enough if you're going to be using it at home or at a tournament. And while it is long enough to reach the TV in front of you, it's also short enough that it's not a hassle to put away. Even when you take the cable out, you can actually close this door because there is a little hole here for the cable to come out so that the controller can be closed while you're using it wired. Now, $150, that's already a massive bargain. But what's really cool about this is that because it works on PS5, you don't need to buy a separate adapter, and normally that would cost you an extra $45. First of all, you have the lever style joystick over here. It's not a Sanwa lever, but it feels very, very similar. You might be able to notice a slightly more hollow feeling, and the micro switches inside feel a little bit, I don't know, more clicky and less smooth. But really, I have dozens of arcade sticks and it feels so similar that I would absolutely be totally fine with using just this arcade stick and not swapping it out. One cool surprise of this included lever is that it also comes with an octa gate. This is included in the box, and it means that instead of having a square gate where you lock into the corners, if you're playing shmups like vertical shooting games, then you're going to absolutely adore having an 8-way gate. And also just some players do prefer to have an arcade stick that doesn't lock into the four corners as you're doing circular motions. Me personally, I'm a purist, so I don't need this. So this joystick lever is perfectly serviceable, but what about the buttons? As you can see, these are standard Sanwa looking buttons. They're not actual Sanwas, and as a result, they do feel slightly different, but when I was testing out this controller, I had zero issues with it. In fact, it is similar enough to Sanwa that I wouldn't swap them out for Sanwa buttons. If I were going to swap these buttons out, I would just replace them with something nicer that has, you know, maybe Cherry MX switches on the inside or something customizable. There are plenty of reasons why you might want to swap buttons out, but not because they're not good enough. I think the only thing I didn't like about them is they're not very smooth on the way down. When you push them down, they kind of have this sort of non-linear feel. Next up, on the top of the controller, as you can see, it has a clear plexiglass thing on the top here, which means that you can put any artwork in that you want and totally customize this controller. I really miss controllers that have this. Get an awesome artist, commission them to draw something really nice and put it underneath the plastic. In fact, it's one of the bigger strengths of this controller that it has such a large surface for putting artwork in, because sometimes some controllers are getting incredibly small these days, so it's like more and more difficult to show off awesome artwork. The F700 does have turbo features built in. I'm gonna be honest, I've never used it. You could use the turbo function to test out certain combos, but honestly, it's not that useful for fighting games. It's mostly if you're playing retro games. This is a waste of time in games that don't have the rapid fire feature built in. Also, for convenience, there is a headset port on the front here, and something I don't see often on these controllers is an actual mute button. So if you don't don't have a mute button on your headset, you can actually mute the headset by pressing a button on the controller. A lot of people don't use wireless with arcade sticks. They're kind of scared that wireless might be not fast enough, there might be some sort of lag. I honestly didn't experience any lag. I didn't do scientific tests though. In my experience using this controller over time, I did not notice any difference between the wired and wireless modes. If you're playing on PlayStation, you'll need to use wired mode or the wireless dongle. You won't be able to use Bluetooth. It's easy to forget that something like this actually has a battery inside. It's a 1000 milliamp hour battery and apparently runs for 20 hours. I didn't test whether it actually lasts exactly 20 hours. I will just say as a side note, on a lot of controllers when I'm testing them, I tend to rank down online because I'm testing out various things, but maybe just because this is a back to basics arcade stick, it's just a lever and buttons and it just does all of the basics perfectly well. I find that every time I was testing the Mayflash after using other controllers, I was ranking up. It also comes with this, a USB-A to USB-C adapter, which meant that I could plug directly into the iPad using the USB-C adapter, and when I wanted to plug into my iPhone, which is still a lightning port, I was able to just click this over to Bluetooth and I connected immediately. And for the extremely curious who simply must know, yes, you can use the wireless dongle plugged directly into your PlayStation or PC, or you can actually plug it into the dongle and plug the USB-C dongle into your iPad, and it will work that way as well. So how does the F700 actually feel to use in practice? You can have your legs spread out with this controller and it's plenty wide enough that it won't fall in between your lap. The position of the lever and the buttons seems to be pretty much perfect. I don't have like the lever a little bit too far to the left and my hand's not really falling off the controller. It's also nice and weighty. It's not too heavy that you feel like you've got a massive weight on your lap, but it is hefty enough that it's not going to be sliding anywhere. There is going to be a large amount of sideways lateral movement, and as a result, I would much prefer to have seen non-slip padding all over the bottom. It only has non-slip padding here on the corners. Now it looks like there's a slight like 1 or 2 millimeter incline here. What you would really like to see is like an actual nice soft edge here. When you are playing on the couch, something that I think all of us do with arcade sticks is we start to laze around and have the arcade stick just become more and more angled like this. This angle becomes more and more steep and it digs more and more into your wrist. Again, it's just one of those things that would be a little bit nicer but not necessary. Although it is a plexiglass that you can add your own custom artwork underneath it, it's kind of got a strange feature to it. It's magnetic, and that means that you should be able to just pull it off immediately, but you can't. And the reason is that once these buttons are in here, they prevent the plexi from being removed. So actually, if you wanted to remove this plexi off the top, you would have to remove the buttons. And in order to remove the buttons, you need to unplug both cables out of all of them. So there are 8 buttons, which means that there are 16 cables plugged into these buttons. So be warned, if you are going to be putting artwork in when you first buy this arcade stick, get some spare buttons just in case, because when you pull these out, if the snap-in buttons do break, you might have to replace them when you're trying to stick the controller back together. But I have to say, this is a minor inconvenience. Just make sure you're careful when you take these buttons out, and to be honest, you might just want to change the buttons anyway for screw type buttons. Let's say it all together. Screw type buttons are better than snap-in buttons. When it comes to build quality, there's really nothing to complain about with the base controller itself. But the main plastic case itself, the metal portions underneath this acrylic here, and the metal portion here on the back, and the just fact that it's just got standard screws in here, everything about it is solid. One thing I would have done differently on this lever is probably the cabling underneath. Now, when you buy the F700, it has this Mayflash default lever, and it is connected by 8 cables. Now, having 8 cables is pretty normal for anyone who uses like a Seimitsu style lever, but on the Mayflash, those cables are actually soldered to the unit. I don't really have an issue with soldered components, but when you're a beginner and you've never really modded your controller before and you've never done maintenance before, just shifting around cables on the inside of here, you do run the risk of bending those soldered joints, and if they snap, you're not going to be able to slide a new connector on. You're going to have to re-solder it back. Fortunately, it's not a big deal because Mayflash actually kind of expects that most people will be putting in their own favorite arcade stick lever in here. On the PCB, there are 2 different ways to connect the lever. If you're not using a lever that has 8 separate cables and you're just going for something to replace it like this, a standard Sanwa 8-way style joystick, you've probably got this 5-pin cable coming out here. And what's fantastic about this is that you have a separate 5-pin connector on the PCB, already designed just for people who want to mod this in. You will need a 5-pin cable, which is not included with the controller, but fortunately you can pick them up cheaply online. I think a pack of 5 of these will cost you something like $5 or $10. You do not need to rewire it. Some controllers have the cables in a different order, but fortunately this cable with absolutely no modifications just goes straight into the lever portion and into the PCB, and you're done. That's the whole mod. If you're just getting started in fighting games, this lever is everything you need, and these buttons are perfectly serviceable to use. You could probably play for years and you would never need to mod this controller. But one of the biggest joys of arcade sticks is customizing them to be perfect for you. Like I said, putting a Sanwa lever in here is plug and play, incredibly easy. But these buttons are also super easy to mod because they're the standard 30mm size, and the buttons aren't abnormally close together or anything, so even if you use collar, screw type buttons, they shouldn't be too close together or anything. There's plenty of space left over on the inside to put stuff. If you are a complete beginner, however, I will just warn you that the first time you mod these buttons, you may forget which cable goes into which, and it's because the colors are completely nonsensical. It's like red, yellow, red, green, and like blue, yellow, yellow, blue, or something on the bottom. It makes absolutely no sense. Listen, at this price point, it's almost kind of ridiculous how many features they've crammed into the F700, so I'm not really sure how they've done it. But can I recommend this as an arcade stick for a beginner? Well, the question is, where do you want to go with your arcade stick after this? I think that this is a fantastic option if you want a controller and you don't know exactly where you want to go in the future. You don't know what kind of artwork you want, so you want a plexi so that it can change any style that you want. You don't know exactly what kind of lever you like, so you want it to be easy to mod. Just swap in any arcade stick and you should be able to use it straight away. You don't know what your favorite kind of buttons are, so just make sure that it's a standard size so that you can swap in any other 30mm buttons. You don't know what platform you're going to be playing on. You might be on Switch today, you might be on PC tomorrow, you might be on PS4 the next day, you might be on PS5 when you upgrade. It works on all of them. You don't know if you want to be wired all the time, or if you want the convenience of wireless, or if you even want to play on your iPhone and you want to use Bluetooth. The F700, as a package, it's basically like the perfect starter set, but at a good quality. One of the comparisons I keep making in my mind is it's a bit like buying a guitar. They have the American one, which is the original, the premium model that they make in America, but they've also got the cheaper, slight cost-cutting version that they make abroad using different parts. But there's also the models that are using like foreign parts, but then being assembled in America. And those models kind of have the best of both worlds. With the Mayflash F700, yes, there are cheaper arcade sticks out there, but there are significantly more expensive arcade sticks out there. And even the controllers that are double the price of the F700, they lack plenty of the features that are on here. All of these features are nice, but nothing matters more than just getting the foundations right. You're not going to want to replace it immediately. If you buy this as your first arcade stick, you're not going to end up like 2 years down the line thinking, oh, I really wish I had spent my money on something nicer from the start. If you buy the stick like this, you're going to be perfectly happy for probably the first year, maybe the first 2 years, and then after that, when you're more picky about exactly what feel you like on the lever and exactly what kind of buttons you want, you could just mod them into this controller. Or maybe if you're winning tournaments, you're making lots of prize money, you can just buy yourself a new controller at that point. Compared to other controllers, it's actually really easy to get replacement parts, not directly from the manufacturer. You can just go on Amazon and they're being sold as separate items. If you want a new acrylic panel, did you break a button? You can just get a whole new set of them. There's a storage compartment here, so you probably didn't lose it, but if you did lose it and you need a new wireless dongle, you can buy the cables separately as well. So maybe if you made a mistake and you snapped one of the cables, or you bent them out of shape, or you plugged it into the wrong thing and you don't know where the connector's gone, you can just buy a brand new wiring harness for like $7 and it will connect the buttons and the lever to the PCB. This is something you don't often see with expensive companies because they expect you, when you have an issue, to just send the whole controller back. I'm all for a company that's going to be pro-consumer, so hats off to you. One more aspect that I think is kind of important when it comes to buying your first arcade stick is having something that's not precious. And I would have absolutely no issue putting it down on a table, walking to the other side of the room and having a chat with a friend and coming back. And I would expect my controller to still be there. If it did get stolen, I'm not going to be completely out of pocket. When you're a beginner at something, I think it does help to have a tool which is nice and rugged that you're not going to be too precious about, because you don't want to be wasting too much time being too careful with it. What you should be doing is spending all of your time getting it out as often as possible and just getting your hands on it, not worrying about whether your watch is scratching it up, and just playing and practicing as much as you can. And for all the reasons why it might be a good first arcade stick, it's also the perfect price point and feature set as a gift. If you've got a girlfriend, boyfriend, or children that you don't know what platform they actually play on, at least you can get a controller that is compatible with all of them. Listen, that's all I've got time for with the Mayflash F700. I've always wanted to review a Mayflash arcade stick, but just never really had the opportunity. And when I was walking around at an event, I actually bumped into them at their booth and we had a chat, and they're like, yeah, we'll send you the F700 if you'd like to do a review on it. So thank you so much for sending me this unit so I could finally actually have an opinion on Mayflash products. I've had a wonderful time with this one. If you are interested in other arcade sticks and other gaming gear, check this video out next. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video if you learned something new, and I will see you all real soon.